Hey everyone, I have finally managed to get my wife to hang out while we do a sort of podcast. We're just going to talk together, and there are some questions people have asked before, and we're going to run through that. But anyway, say hi. Well, you can't say hi, but here's my wife. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to the Visa and Sharan podcast, maybe? I don't know, we'll try it. Let's go through some questions. So the first question I got the last time was about the GEP. Do you want to discuss the GEP as the first question? Shall we skip it?
Well, sure, we can discuss the GEP.
The Gifted Education Program.
There was gifted discourse on the timeline again this week. Right?
There was. Apparently in New York, they are shutting down their Gifted and Talented program. How do you feel about that?
Well, the discourse is messy, like it always is.
Indeed.
I think the idea behind those programs are good. I don't know how it works in New York, of course, but I think it's better that every child gets treated as if they were in a gifted and talented program than to shut those programs down because of the very obvious problems they have.
Wait, what are the problems actually? I haven't been following.
I mean, I'm guessing it's the same as it is here,
Is it?
It's not so much testing for whether you're gifted and talented, it's testing for whether you have money, whether your parents have money, and whether you end up in the correct schools.
Alas, that's unfortunate. But yeah, So let me read the question Jay asked. I don't know if this is out of bounds, but we'd love to hear more about your experiences in school, especially after you mentioned that you both used to be in a gifted program. Well, yeah, so the story is we were 10 when we 9, right? When we got into the GEP. I enjoyed, as far as school could be enjoyed. So I didn't like school to begin with, but as far as school was concerned, I liked, smaller classroom sizes, being challenged to do interesting things. That was alright. How did you feel?
I actually wonder if I would have been better off not being in the GEP.
How would that have?
Just, school was easy for me.
Yeah.
Like, you spend your first 3 years in school just being at the top of your class all the time. And you don't have to pay that much attention, and that leaves more time for your own personal fuckeries.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think when I got into the GEP, it was challenging, and I don't know, it was a bit depressing to, like most people would feel... I guess it depends on how you cope with the challenge lah.
Right, you went from being an A student to being like a B and C student.
Yeah.
And that troubled you.
Yeah.
It didn't bother me at all.
Well, it bothered me because I saw the impact it had on my parents. And
so your parents were troubled that you were no longer an A student when you were in a gifted class? That makes no sense though.
Yes.
Right? It's like you're the top athlete in your country and then you don't get gold medal at the Olympics.
Yes.
Because you're now competing at a higher standard.
Yes.
But okay.
But my parents are sometimes a bit cruel about it, and
Cruel how?
No comment.
Not today. Okay, slowly.
And I also had a younger brother.
Yes.
And so after I got into the GP, they wanted him to be in the GP, and so they started, the tuition and the annoying him, and
poor guy.
I felt bad about that.
Yeah. So in my case, I'm the youngest son, but my parents would introduce me to other people as their gifted child, and so my brother, who didn't ask for any, he's an older brother and he is obviously troubled by this, and I didn't ask them to do that, right? And nobody who's gonna prepare you for this, right? It's not like they're gonna tell you, welcome to the GEP. Your parents are now gonna treat you probably gonna treat you differently than they treat your other siblings, and that's gonna be a source of conflict in your life. Nobody says that shit.
Yeah, and it's funny, right? When you look back, and when we were in primary school, there was a pair of twins in our school.
Yes.
One was in class and one wasn't.
Yes.
It was the same way with me in the in JC as well.
Mm-hmm.
Another set of twins, one of whom was in the gifted. No, it wasn't gifted then. It was still just one of the better classes and one of the worst classes. And those two would come to school together and then not talk to each other in school. I kind of wonder what it was about.
I hope they are better now.
Yeah.
That's sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so you really see how something like a gifted program, people, I guess, they direct their attention at the program itself. But what it really does is it kind of throws into sharp relief all of the existing conflicts and disparities in society and in family and in, like, just, it's like, how do kids treat each other when you separate them? And how, but like, a few of my friends on Twitter, they are like, they say that they were basically spared bullying because of the gifted classes.
That
Because
happened here also, I think, a while ago. Every few years, like, Singapore has the discussion on the GP that plays out in the mainstream media, and I think the last time someone wrote into the forum page to say, their kids were clearly different and bullied in normal class before they got to the GEP, where they were happy to have found others like them. And that's always, worth keeping in mind, I guess.
yeah, that's complicated. Did you feel when you were in primary 1, 2, and 3 that you were different than your peers?
No.
I think I did a little bit, but it didn't bother me. It didn't.
I mean, I don't know what, like, different... like, I used to remember, like, class being somewhat boring, and, like, my house was right next to school, so I actually did this, like, probably more than I should admit, but I used to just pretend to be sick and get called, you call home to get picked up to leave school early, and, like, it I don't think, like, I'm this quiet, good girl, so no teacher's gonna think I'm, like, it's truancy or whatever, but yeah, I enjoyed skipping class a lot.
So you were naughty even before you met me.
Shut up.
So you can't blame me.
I mean, but I naughtied quietly. That's the difference.
Sure. That's because you could get away with being naughty quietly. So I was tall and brown and I couldn't hide.
Sure.
Right, but it's interesting. It's interesting to hear.
So, like, when you ask, did I feel different? I don't think that's something I've, like, thought about. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say I felt there was a difference in I would say intellectual curiosity, but it didn't get in the way of, like, my friendships. Like, I was friends with kids and we loved things, and it's just we're all different in different ways, right? So it doesn't really matter at that age, I guess. So we'll never know for sure, but it's something to think about. Anyway, let's move on to more different questions. Marshall asked, what are the places where your worldviews most depart?
Oh, where do we start?
The big one that comes to me is our differences of opinion about, like, security and being public and being private.
Yep.
But I feel like we used to have conflicts about that, but now we kind of have arrived at a synthesis. Would you say that's correct?
I think we better understand each other's point of view, but that doesn't... So we're better understanding each other's point of view allows us to better manage how we make decisions today, but I think we're still, like, fundamentally different, which is better at the decision making framework.
Yeah, I mean, we are different, and we have different. So I mean, just to kind of recap, I guess, like, you have a security minded perspective where you try not to be seen or heard unnecessarily in a way that just, if you can avoid trouble, you try to stay out of trouble. That's your thing. You try to have OPSEC and try to those. Whereas my view of security is that I can't hide because I'm tall and dark and have a unique name and all of that stuff. And so I seek security by being public, which is to make friends and to be visible, and so that if I ever get in trouble, if I'm ever, just the background anxiety that I used to have that I never articulated until recently is that I used to worry that, if, like, I get in trouble with the authorities, or let's say I'm traveling somewhere abroad and there's like some altercation at a bar, right? And, like, I just felt instinctively that people would not take my side, that they would assume that the tall brown man is the dangerous, threatening one. And so I need to make sure that I always have, like, a witness or a friend, someone in the room who knows who I am and cares about me. So that's been my security model, sort of. And we didn't realize this about each other, I guess, initially, and so, like, our behavior didn't make sense to each other. That's the primary way that I think our worldviews depart. Another big one, I guess you could say, is that I am publicly optimistic and you are publicly pessimistic. You think that's correct?
I don't think of myself as being publicly pessimistic.
Then how do you frame it?
Am I not just fundamentally pessimistic?
Fundamentally pessimistic? You claim to be, I think.
But I'm not carrying
I don't
on
think.
wrong.
Yeah, I think you have more optimism within you than you would like to admit. Because if you truly didn't believe that change is possible,
You can't just call me out like that on a recorded podcast.
okay, maybe not today, but and I am more cynical and pessimistic than people realize, because I mean I wouldn't be doing the things that I did if I wasn't worried about what would happen if I didn't. So it's like, again, it's like a person who I don't know how
I
people,
think the words optimistic and pessimistic are like fundamentally broken.
maybe, yeah, it's not very helpful. Like it's a very blunt, broad thing. But I do use the phrase like cultivate a casual optimism in my book. It's like I do think there is, just the knowledge that things can change and that change does happen. It's like, what do you, I mean, when we start investigating this, we start going to places like, what do you really believe and what do you really think?
But why is that optimistic and not just like realistic? Like, of course things change. Things have always changed.
So the problem with what people think is what with saying realistic, is that people don't accurately perceive reality. I don't, you don't, nobody does. And so you can't, so describing something as realistic is hubris, because we don't know what reality is. And people who think they know what reality is, they are fooling themselves. And so it's dangerous it's better to describe yourself as either optimist or pessimist than realist, because well, it depends on the context, but reality is that bitch.
It's so stupid.
What is reality?
Just-
Stupid?
No, humans not really agreeing on what words mean.
Well, it's amazing that we can communicate at all.
Yeah.
Right, so that's my starting point. So so that little exchange just captures like our difference, right? Like you think it's so you focus on how people can't communicate, and I default to it's amazing that communication is possible. And
That's true.
even if we disagree about what optimism and pessimism is, like my starting point and your starting point are different,
That's true.
right? But you don't give up. If you gave up on people, that's different, right? Wait, let's look for more questions. You're opening more. You're opening my tabs. The challenges of ADHD and marriage. I said this deserves an entire episode, but let's just chat a bit. Yeah, what's ADHD like in your marriage?
Well, when we got married, we didn't
Neither of us realized.
were aware.
Yeah.
And then early on, we realized that, Lisa's probably has ADHD. And then a few years later, we realized, I probably do as well.
Haha.
So,
Psych.
so the joke is really when, if we have kids and they also have ADHD, the whole place will be a goddamn circus. And I guess that's kind of exciting. But managing ADHD in a marriage, I guess the first thing to really understand is your spouse isn't being a pain in the ass because they want to be. And you should fundamentally believe that you're in a relationship with a person who wants to do the right thing and not be as annoying. It's the way people talk to kids, right? Like,
Yes.
there was a tweet recently that was something like everyone is doing the best they can, and a few people in the reply said, "But I know I'm not doing my best."
Right.
And I thought that was so funny because like you are like you're at the scope of your limit, and if you could do any better than that, you would be doing it.
Right.
If you're saying that you're choosing not to do any better, but you want to, then you're still at the limit of your current ability. Like it's
Yes.
not a saying what you say about how you are not doing your best is how you cope.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it's the reality isn't what you want it to be lah.
Yes, people. I mean, so part of this again is the problem of language and perception and models and everything. But I think it's true that people do use hypothetical perceptions and judge themselves against it.
Mm.
Like, I do know that on my best ever day of writing in terms of volume, I once wrote about 15,000 words in a day, 15 word vomits. And that took, and I know that I can do one word vomit in 15 minutes if I'm going fast. So I did 15 of those that day. How many is that? Let's just say 16. It's 4 hours. So theoretically, I could write 15,000 words in 4 hours. So I could, it's 4 p.m. now. After we're done with this, I could theoretically write 15,000 words in the next 4 hours. And that's just talking about volume. And so is it that each day that I don't write 15,000 words is I'm not at my best? And it gets complicated because, again, the best words I've written as a writer, they almost always happen by accident. They almost always happen unexpectedly. And so, when you start, again, it's like what you're saying about optimism and pessimism. Like the concept of best, again, it's too vague. Like, what does your best really mean? Like who you are changes moment to moment. What you're capable of changes moment to moment. What you're receiving, what you're responding. But, now I'm getting kind of abstract. But if we're talking about, again, how are you measuring your best? In what context? Like, are you talking about being able to sit at your desk and do work, like sometimes, like earlier somebody was asking, how do I make more decisions, or how do I get better at making decisions? And I said, start with making small decisions. And then afterwards somebody else, the conversation went on, and the question was just like, what if I have tons and tons of decisions to make? And then, at one level you could try to solve that by trying to lower your standards and just make lots of good enough decisions. But getting good at that might be getting good at the wrong game, because it's possible that you think you have a lot of decisions to make, but it's actually you're distracting yourself from like 2 really difficult decisions that you're avoiding.
Yep.
And so one person might think I'm at my best when I'm making 100 decisions a day, but actually you're at your best when you make that one very difficult decision that you can't make because you have like trauma, you have emotional aversion to it. So it's complicated. It's really we can't simplify this to that. But anyway, we were still talking about ADHD and marriage, and so you were talking about your partner, seeing your partner as your partner, right?
Yeah.
Which brings us to another question from Minty: couple dynamics and conflict resolution. You have one of the most interesting dynamics I've seen on Twitter. What do you think is interesting about our dynamic?
I don't know, actually. I really wish we could like ask people what.
Yeah, it's funny. So I have a thread where I just make a list of like funny exchanges that we've had in real life. So I just kind of report our jokes on Twitter. And people,
that sounds weird. That sounds weird, right?
Yeah, but being online is kind of weird, right? Like writing a book is kind of weird. Tweeting is kind of weird. Like, hey, I'm just going to share details of my life with strangers. But I did that. And part of why I do that is part of my threat model thing, which is that by talking about our relationship, I demonstrate that. I mean, I'm not this clinical about it, but like, just, it matters to me that people know that I love you.
Aww.
And that you are loved, and that it's. I think it's important.
Aww.
I mean, I do this selfishly. As in, like I've said before, that part of the reason I'm so online is because I remember being a kid feeling isolated and alone, and there was no one like me in my life. And I think it's important that, for example, young brown kids see an example of a happy, healthy marriage, a couple having fun, loving each other, enjoying each other. I think that's important, but at the same time, I don't wanna be like, we are people. We were not put on this earth to be role models for other people, right? Like, and if we get, like, you've seen how on Instagram or YouTube or whatever, there are these couples, and then I don't actually follow the details that much, but why do you say Jesus?
Just I remember that couple that like, just their whole marriage and their whole children are just a display of so uncomfortable.
Yeah, so that's messed up. We would never do that. So it's like I'm very selective in what I share. It's not like we broadcast our entire lives. It's just little snippets that we feel it's okay to share. And some people could say, oh, you're being selective, but all communication is selective, right? Like nobody broadcasts their entire life, even to themselves. Like there are parts of yourself that you shadow from yourself. Anyway, so I have that thread, the what gets measured gets managed thread. And people really like it.
I always feel bad when like someone like goes through that thread and likes like 10 of those tweets and then they follow me because like whatever they hope to get from me is probably not what they're gonna get.
But that's fine. That's fine. You know, like they've seen how I see you, but you are your own person, so you're not obliged to be the person that
Yeah,
I see.
it's just funny.
Yeah, if I mean caveat emptor. But yeah, you know, it's interesting how many. I especially notice when it's the women, right? It's the young women who say things. It can get quite dramatic. They'll be like, "Oh, you give me hope that," and I'm like, I'm not a hope giving man. You know? I'm just some guy. I'm not, you know, I'm not but you know, that's how it is. It's this strange paradox of you don't wanna be this fake, artificial, you know. And I'm for some reason I'm thinking of like churches and like people who just the pastor and their wife and how they are like a model for the whole church, and then a few years later like one of them is cheating on the other, and then they have it's just awkward for everyone involved. Like because you pedestalize this image of this couple and no one can bear the weight of their entire community's expectations.
I guess anytime you get a look into someone's like real relationships is always like it's really a window into someone else's experience, right? Like and I think as humans, like people are really quite obsessed with that just the life you live is the life you live. And what you think are the thoughts you think. And, you know, like this is one of those things that always just kind of trips me up and blows my mind a bit. Like, you can be as close as you want to anyone else and you still have never lived their life. And so when we live in a world that everything you get about, like, other people's marriages are, you know, like the front page of tabloids.
That's true.
You know, politicians and how they manage their career and their personal life, and it's all very fake is not the right word, but it's all, I don't know. It's all weird.
It's intermediated. It's like
like there is a pitch there and you don't necessarily always know what it is, and that's why like my favorite places to hang out on the internet are really where people are talking about their own problems, right? Like, you know, that's why like the things like, am I the asshole, or you know, what's the mother-in-law? Like just the dealing with your life and your relationship and needing someone to see and perceive that accurately is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, the reason why people like the thread is it's such a narrow slice of life.
Yeah.
You know, I if I were a single person on the internet, I'll be like, you know, yes, I would like to be in a relationship with someone who gets my jokes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alright, we are like 23 minutes in, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this here and then we'll do another one maybe with the other questions. But that's it for our first episode. Hope you guys enjoyed getting to hear my wife. I think I'm holding the mic a little bit weirdly, so she might be a bit quiet, but we will troubleshoot as we go. Say bye.
Bye.
Bye.